Urgent. Russia is on its knees. The internet has been shut off in Siberia. You have to hear this whining from Russians. The return to the 90s has begun. Russia has written farewell letters to civilization. Everything collapsed in an instant. Gerasimov is being dismissed. The general is dragging the entire leadership down with him. Shock. A coup has started in Russia. Putin is being overthrown right now. Z propagandists have started singing an anti-Putin tune. The special military operation needs to end, but the Russian army can't handle prolonged fighting. The truth is coming out from all sides. More on this coming up. Watch until the end. Greetings. This is Ukraine Today, Renata Aslanova, and the latest events. It looks like it's begun in Russia. Even the propagandists can't take it anymore. War correspondent Filatov admitted that Russian local assaults are nothing but senseless horror. Enemy columns are burning. The losses are colossal. There are zero results.
The latest videos attached to these mechanized assaults. Those who know there's no success there at all. They've lost people, they've lost equipment. As for the results, I don't know what they're officially claiming, but in reality there are no results.
Moreover, sharp statements are increasingly making their way onto Russian television, saying that the Kremlin will ultimately have to scale back its ambitions and seek a compromise with Ukraine. The original goals of the so-called special military operation are simply falling apart before our eyes.
It seems to me that everything is heading toward Russia probably agreeing to what's being called a deal. A deal always involves compromises. And compromises mean stepping back from the goals and intentions that were previously declared. Apparently we are in for... It seems we have been forced to give up on some of our objectives. And why is that? Because, as Konstantin Vladimirovich rightly said, it's already been 3.5 years. And
now Tayumen is joining us. Russians are complaining that life without mobile internet has begun. Payment terminals are becoming a thing of the past. It's time to remember cash.
We're in isolation. I just step outside my house and my phone turns into a brick because nothing works at all. I go to a gas station and I have to carry a card with me because my mobile internet doesn't work. Just now I went into a coffee shop and I couldn't pay because their terminal wasn't working due to the mobile internet being down. Their Wi-Fi isn't working either. So I just left with nothing because I couldn't pay by card or scan a QR code. You need cash. Now everyone has to make phone calls again. And
this isn't about border regions, but about Siberia, deep inside what seemed like safe Russia. But even there, a full-scale rollback to the last century is underway.
Progress in Russia has paused, and it seems it will stay that way for a long time. Strangely enough, Russians don't seem happy about this prospect.
I was just at the Federal Center, and even there I couldn't pay for anything because small businesses can't use their terminals because there's no internet. And so, who suffers as a result? It's not even the consumer, but small businesses. Because I can do without these things. Basically, I couldn't buy anything and I couldn't withdraw money. Well, I just left and I won't go back, just like most people.
And now, a sensation. While Siberia is still confused by all this commotion, the Krasnodar region has realized there's no turning back. We have to adapt. Now, instead of phones, we use walkie-talkies.
I'm saying cookies, Illinois. Please find me Picky Rio. I
am looking. Oh no, this is something else. There's no Illinois Peaky here.
The harsh realities of life in Russia without embellishment.
Why a walkie-talkie? I can't show the video.
It's hard to believe, but Russia is being torn apart from the inside. Valery Gerasimov is back in touch. He started firing generals because of his own lies to Putin about the situation near Pokrovsk.
Gerasimov is in a panic, looking for someone to blame for the failures and lies to Putin about how they supposedly defeated everyone, captured everything, and surrounded them.
According to blogger and journalist Zolkin, heads have already started to roll. At the very least, the chief of the Russian general staff has fired 2 generals.
Whether Gerasimov himself will be dismissed is still unknown. In a way, this liar is even playing into our hands.
The truth is shocking. Gerasimov really is hanging by a thread. A replacement has already been found in Moscow. Putin is in a panic and swinging between extremes. The military leadership is collapsing like a house of cards. There is chaos and mutual betrayal in the dictator's inner circle. The situation is reaching a boiling point. Will there be anyone left to give orders? All the details are coming up in the next segment.
The last leg of Valery Gerasimov's chair has broken. About how the Kremlin is very dissatisfied with the general's work and, to put it mildly, his less than truthful reports from the front. This is reported by the Atesh movement, citing information from officers of one of the Russian military groups.
Putin gave Gerasimov a deadline to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. This order is the general's last chance to keep his position. Against the backdrop of this ultimatum, there has been a sharp increase in meat grinder tactics on the Pokrovsk front. The command is sending massive waves of personnel into suicidal attacks in order to fulfill the order at any cost.
The unremarkable, charisma-lacking Valery Gerasimov, a man to whom Putin owes his first presidential term, his very power. It was he who, while Moscow was preparing to check boxes on ballots, led the combat operations for the village of Komsomolskoye. This 15-day-long battle became the key and final one in Russia's second Chechen campaign. Gerasimov delivered victory to candidate Putin, marching over the countless corpses of Russian soldiers and local residents.
The residents were allowed to leave the village, but they weren't allowed to go far. They were forced to spend several days on the outskirts of the village, but in reality, they were being used as human shields. In
2012, it was Gerasimov who presented the country's leadership with the formula for hybrid warfare. At that time, he insisted that it was necessary to move away from classical wars toward destabilization on the ground.
the path to this lies in actively using the protest potential of the fifth column.
A little later, the Gerasimov formula was tested by the Russians first in Crimea and then in Donbass. According to Bellingcat investigators, it was Valery Gerasimov who, in 2014, initiated the deployment of regular Russian troops near Ukrainian Ilovaisk and the transfer of Russian military equipment to the separatists, from which, by the way, the Malaysian Boeing was shot down. Mute Gerasim, as the Grey Cardinal of the General Staff is called among themselves, has outlasted all his loud and flamboyant critics.
They'll be eating their guts in hell slowly and painfully for what they have done. We're currently short on ammunition by approximately 70%. Shoigu, Gerasimov, can you tell me, where exactly is the ammunition?
Prigozhin has been blown up. Strelkov-Gherkin is rotting behind bars. After the scandal, it was thanks to Valery Gerasimov's efforts that the favorite of Russian Z supporters, General Popov, was sent there. Even Shoigu was carried out of the Ministry of Defense. But Mute Gerasimov continues to sit in his chair, even though rumors of his dismissal have been spreading actively since last summer. And now, supposedly, there are actually grounds for them. If Gerasimov fails to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November, he will be replaced by Viktor Viktorovich Paznikir, who was born and raised not far from the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Not much is known about him. He was awarded the Order of Zhukov by a classified decree, and in February 2024, he received the rank of the high-ranking military rank of Colonel General.
It's hard to call this military leader a public figure. His name was first mentioned in the media after the start of the operation in Syria. The Lieutenant General held the position of First Deputy Chief of the main operational directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. His briefings were dedicated to the situation around Palmyra and Aleppo. Paznikir also spoke about the work of the Russian military police in the Middle East and criticized the presence of American naval forces in the region. The Lieutenant General's statement about the US plans to develop a global missile defense system caused a major stir. At the Moscow Conference on International Security, Paznikir called Washington a likely adversary of Moscow. To overcome missile defense systems, Viktor Viktorovich proposed using the Sarmat and Avangard complexes.
It is still unknown whether Gerasimov will be able to outsmart his adversaries again and hold his position. Since the summer, the occupiers have been amassing troops in the Pokrovsk direction and probing for weak spots in the Ukrainian defenses. On their side are Russia's vast resources, which are spared no expense to achieve their goals, and a huge number of fortune seekers enticed by contracts and the new status of hero. And in 2025, Pokrovsk could become an important and decisive battle, much like the Chechen village of Komsomolskoye once was.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
However, even the ground beneath Putin's feet is starting to shake. The Kremlin is on the verge of exploding from within. The dictator who kept everyone in fear for years is now trembling himself with suspicion. His closest associates are turning away. Generals whisper about life after Putin, and the elites are preparing escape routes. Putin is flailing between his subordinates, demanding investigations and punishments, but the wheel of history is already in motion. Will this be the beginning of the end for the regime? More on this ahead.
For almost a quarter of a century, Vladimir Putin has been building a system of personal power in Russia, a totalitarian state where any dissent is punished to instill fear and cement the regime. but today this monolith is beginning to crack. The Russian dictator is in a panic, afraid of losing his grip on Russia. As the Telegraph writes, the bunker dweller is meticulously guarding his regime against any threats. Recently, the FSB accused Mikhail Khodorkovsky and 22 other members of the Russian anti-war committee of preparing for a coup d'etat. According to the security service, the organization is allegedly planning a violent seizure of power and the overthrow of the constitutional order.
This tells us that the Kremlin is paranoid. Putin is searching for enemies in an attempt to strengthen his regime. John Herbst, Senior Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council and former US Ambassador to Ukraine.
After spending 10 years in a Siberian prison, Khodorkovsky was released in 2013 and fled to Europe, where he founded the Anti-War Committee in 2022. In an interview with The Telegraph, he stated that the FSB's accusation reflects the Kremlin's fear of the future and the issue of power transfer.
What do we have in Russia? A prime minister whom no one elected, but whom Putin appointed. Courts appointed by Putin. A parliament whose seats were filled as a result of rigged elections and in whose legitimacy no one believes. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Russian entrepreneur and publicist.
They couldn't care less about the liberals who fled after being castrated. They're not afraid of them at all. They're not afraid of each other. Of the same kind of predators, those who walk around you, smile in your face every day, and swear loyalty. Those are the ones who can, and Putin knows this perfectly well. And the Medvedev incident with Prigozhin, even if it was staged, clearly showed that no one is going to defend him. Neither the National Guard, nor the police, nor the rank and file, nor the generals. No one cares, no one gives a damn. And that's why Putin is afraid. And
indeed, fear becomes the key word. The dictator is cornered and the economic situation only heightens the anxiety.
Russia's Minister of Economy, Maxim Reshetnikov, has admitted that the country is on the brink of recession. The banking system is suffocating under the debts of defense enterprises. According to Harvard analyst Craig Kennedy, $190 billion in loans have been issued to defense industry companies without guarantees. And now this bubble could burst at any moment? Moreover, Ukrainian drones have destroyed more than half of Russia's oil refineries, forcing refuelers into huge lines at gas stations and causing a fuel shortage. And new sanctions from across the ocean have only intensified the blow. Donald Trump has imposed the most painful restrictions since the start of the war. The giants Rosneft and Lukoil have come under fire. Now China and India are cutting back on purchases of Russian oil. Almost 3 million barrels per day are at risk. And along with them, half of the Kremlin's revenue. But Putin fears not only internal threats, but external ones as well. The dictator is pulling more and more air defense systems to the Kremlin. There are already 5 layers of defense around the capital. Pantsir S-300 and S-400 systems are being brought in from all regions.
And on top of all this, Russian industry is suffocating. Factories are shutting down. Once successful plants are coming to a halt. The country is sliding into an economic abyss. Putin stubbornly pretends that everything is under control. But the reality is different. The war and sanctions have completely exhausted the Kremlin. The momentum is gone and there are no prospects. Will the Kremlin ever be able to recover? More on this coming up.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion, and claims about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts.
There is really no other way to describe it, honestly. Well, honestly, this really isn't our choice, and we actually don't want things to develop this way at all.
Putin is trying to bluff and save face by creating an illusion of success. But it's all in vain. The Russian economy is rapidly going downhill. Almost 80% of the country's industry has fallen into recession.
When we talk about individual sectors, it means that production in these sectors compared to the same period, which we usually compare to the previous year, has gotten worse. In other words, things aren't improving, they're getting worse. And recession is exactly that, worsening, when you're in the negative. When a recession becomes prolonged, meaning not just 1 year, but say 3 or 4 years of decline, then it's no longer a recession, it's a depression.
Finally, since September, the overall growth of industrial production in Russia has slowed to 0.3% year-on-year. That's almost 19 times less than last year.
There simply aren't enough people available to handle the workload, and there aren't even the most basic resources or necessary materials to pay for the delivery and transportation of essential components, for the purchase of the goods you need for processing. As a result, you end up producing less. And when you produce less, there you have it, a recession, a negative compared to the previous period.
The sharpest decline is seen in those civilian industries that were supposed to replace the products of foreign companies that left Russia after the start of the full-scale war.
It's the collapse of import substitution. There were plans to replace everything, but to do that, you have to produce what you're going to use as a substitute. And if you don't produce what you need to substitute, then how are you going to do it? Substitution with imported products when you're not doing anything yourself. So, of course, this is a decline in the economy in any case. It means that goods are not being produced. If they're not being produced, then there's no point in keeping the people who make them. And that means unemployment. And unemployment is always an unpleasant story.
In fact, the domestic market is deprived of consumer goods, and Russian factories are unable to make up for the shortage.
Even it would seem the military sector, part of the military sector is the production of weapons and ammunition. In September of this year compared to September of last year, Russia is down 1.3%. So even the production of weapons and ammunition is already in the red, let alone the rest of the economy, which is showing even worse results.
The central bank has predicted that Russia could face its worst economic downturn since the 1990s if sanctions are tightened. If the situation does not improve by 2026, the Kremlin could lose $108 billion in export revenues.
Here the problems are, let's say, still gaining momentum, but their first manifestations are already visible. In Russia, taxes have been rising since the beginning of the year. The sales tax will come into effect on December 1st, and the environmental tax is set to increase almost tenfold starting November 1st, literally in just a week. So even just a couple of days. So it turns out that all these various economic problems are cropping up more and more often, and they're constantly appearing in the news because, it's a kind of zugzwang situation when you don't have a good option.
Russian Sberbank, following Gazprom, has begun mass layoffs. In the first quarter, the staff of the largest bank, which holds half of all individual deposits, decreased by 8,600 employees, in the second quarter by 3,500, and in the third by 1,500.
From Sberbank of Russia, when they see, here's a direct quote from Sberbank's head, Herman Gref, during 2025, there is not a single new investment project that Sberbank is working on. So the people responsible for this area simply have nothing to do. And since they have nothing to do, there's no point in paying them a salary, so they're being laid off. That's why laying people off is a demonstration that there is no demand for the economic functions that Sberbank provides. And accordingly, these people are cut. But this is just one of many examples.
That's the reality. Only Putin is trying to hide it all. But there's nowhere left to run. The economy is cracking, the country is losing money.
How do you assess the scale of the catastrophe that Russia has found itself in? Share your opinion in the comments. Like this video to stay up to date with the main news. There's more to come.